Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
We are so excited to be able to be here with you all tonight. We had a lot of fun putting this episode together, and we really hope that you get something out of this message, which is why we said goodbye to Sunday and why you should too. And if you would like to leave your wins from this last week, the previous episodes, we gave you a lot of ideas about things that you can do to adopt that no more someday mindset. And so there's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can start by implementing it into your everyday, by trading out and leveraging your time, maybe asking a friend who's more skilled in that area if they would be willing to help, and things like that. So, and just being able to eliminate time wasters, and so if you did find a way to implement one of those things, we would love for you to comment.
Let us know how the last week went. We didn't get any comments on our last video, which is fine. We're just getting kind of started here and in rhythm. But we want this to be, make this clear that the No More Some Days is more than just a motto for us. It's really a mindset and how we're trying to live our lives and how we want to help other people implement in their lives as well. So we want it to be as practical and as applicable as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want you guys to feel like you're a part of it. So, so the first thing we're going to talk about today and how we said goodbye to someday, we said that we didn't want to have regrets. And I don't know about you, but this is a hard one for me.
In what way?
Because I think it's easy to say, I don't want to regret not working out today, but you feel like you've woken up on the wrong side of the bed, you're tired, you're worn out, it's like the follow through. Yeah. So, for me, this is a tough one because I feel the guilt, the inner guilt of I don't want to regret this, but it's also, I know that if I don't do that action, I'm also gonna really regret this. And, I don't know about you guys, we kind of touched on this, I think, last time, but we really want to, feel like we've been used up at the end of our lives. And so that takes courage to step into something because you don't want to have regrets. You don't want to have something that happens, or something you don't act on, you don't make that phone call, you don't send that email, you don't start that, charity that you've been meaning to start. In my case, you don't start that music camp. When you're in that position, it's easy to feel like, I regret this. I wanted to have done this. Why didn't I do the thing?
Yeah, and I think that's a common fear of all of us is that we're going to live our lives and at the end of our life have some regret, something unspoken, something undone. Right. That call that you didn't make. I mean, I know there's times when I look back through my life and there's things that I wish I had done, I knew I should have done, and because of the time, I no longer have that opportunity, I no longer have that possibility, and that's a heavy weight to bear, a very heavy weight, especially if it's something with a person, not getting to say goodbye, not getting to express something to somebody. So this runs the gamut, and like we were saying at the beginning, this is about not putting excuses. No More Some Days is really, if you think about the inverse, it's about not making excuses.
Yeah, that's true.
Of tomorrow I'm going to do that, 10 years from now I'm going to do that, 20 years down the road I'm going to do that.
Right.
Well, no, because that, we've been talking about, there are no tomorrows, there are no more some days. So having that, eliminating those things that we know we need to do and we want to do that would be regrets if we get to the end of our life, right, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and I even think about just smiling at somebody or saying hello, especially these days. That's something that's so small, but people are in desperate need of feeling loved. And I think we have an incredible opportunity right now, even just to smile at somebody and say hello and just ask them how they are, or compliment them in some way. You don't necessarily have to know them to be a blessing to their life. And I think that's just so powerful. So I think just feeling like at the end of your life, you're totally used up, as if every good thing you have is like blood in your veins and it's being sucked out, so that you don't get to your final day and go, oops. You know, and there's always going to be things, right? There's always going to be things. So it's not like being perfect, but it's about acting on those nudges and those inner dreams and desires. For me, another one is like evangelism and speaking to people about the gospel. That's so important to me. And so, you know, just starting a conversation with someone and going from there and sharing with them about Jesus.
Well, yeah, I mean, just think about that song that a lot of us sing in church or have sung. We haven't sung in a while, but you never mentioned him to me.
Yeah,
is kind of
it's really
that you get that pang in your chest about going to Judgment Day and seeing your neighbor or your friend there, and you never even mention Jesus to him. That's a regret that we want to guard against, not having to hear that from somebody else. So I think that's just another example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is so true. So why don't you go ahead with the next one? I think this is really a powerful one.
Yeah, so the next one we were thinking about, we wanted to share was you not becoming, sorry, my notes. Who is going to go without something because you didn't show up how you were supposed to? You know, if you believe that you've been given any kind of gifts, you've been born with gifts, you've been able to cultivate gifts, you've been given the opportunity, then you have somewhat of a responsibility to use those, to grow those, to cultivate them, to enhance those and not keep them bottled up inside you. So thinking about the scope of your life, if you don't use those, if you don't cultivate them or grow them, then who in your life, maybe your family, your friends, your community, your country, your world, who is going to go without those, the talents that you could have cultivated and made something or created something because you didn't do that?
Right.
And I think, you know, that's one of the things that you hear, one of the arguments for against abortion is, what if one of those babies that was aborted cured cancer?
Right.
You know, they don't have that opportunity. What if they were able to solve some global hunger? I mean, whatever it is. What if, I mean, they never had that opportunity because they were never able, given that opportunity of life. So the same thing within us. If we never use what's in us, we might as well not have ever had that talent or ability.
Right. And yeah, I think about this even, you know, think about your family or your friends around you. Who you are affects them. It affects where they shop and what they think about and the movies that they watch and the places that they go. And that's huge. Your circle of influence is a lot of the time a lot bigger than you think. And so when you actually sit down and think about, okay, what if I shifted my mindset to no more some days, there we go. And I actually started living in a way that I was being totally used up and totally ready to just step into my potential, then I could affect them in such a positive way. People this isn't necessarily just random people. These are people that you know about, that you care about, that are close to you. And I've even seen this in my own life. As I've adopted this mindset, people around me have started to make positive changes in their lives because of my choice to say yes to some things, to have that mindset and to step into those talents. And I think that's such a good point about, you know, what if that baby could have been the next, you know, whatever, like even, you know, a mom or a dad that helped to nurture and care for another child or adopt children or whatever it is, you know, there's so many things.
Yeah, I mean, just think about a mentor or family member in your own life that what if they hadn't made that impact that they did on you? Like, where would you be? Probably not where you are now, not in a good place, whether it's your parents or friend, a mentor, whatever. If they hadn't been that force in your life, then you probably wouldn't be where you are now.
Yeah, I think about this with my best friend from college. Because I was super quiet, which is hard to believe, I know. I'm definitely an extrovert, but I was super quiet when I first came to visit the college that I went to. And she saw me eating, when it came time, we had like an orientation type thing. And when it came time for lunch, you know, a lot of the college kids were sitting together, my group, and I went and sat with my dad. And part of it was I didn't want him to be alone. But part of it was that I felt really shy. And she came up and said, no, you're not sitting here. You're not sitting with your dad. You're going to come and you're going to sit with us in a loving way. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if she hadn't have done that, I may not have felt confident enough. And then our friendship, which blossomed into something really beautiful, wouldn't have happened, you know? And so I think when you step into those moments, even us, I think about this, Matt, like we're stepping into a moment here with starting this video series. We could have not done that, and we're deciding to do that anyways. And I think that goes along with it. Maybe there's going to be somebody that we don't even know now that's going to be affected and impacted positively by this podcast or video series. I'm saying the wrong words.
Yeah, and it reminded me of another biblical example of Esther, such a time as this.
Yes.
Like, we live in a world now where there isn't a lot of truth necessarily in circles. Even speaking truth in some ways is looked down on, or you can be called out, or whatever. Like, even being able to have your voice heard is really important right now.
Yeah.
Speaking truth in whatever vein that is, I'm not just speaking religiously, but just in any vein, is something that some people shy away from now because of the possible repercussions on social media, or how they'll be viewed in their circles, or unfortunately even in their workplace. And so we silence ourselves and we mute ourselves and say, oh, well, that's somebody else's job. Somebody else will speak the truth. You know, my preacher will speak the truth. My boss will speak the truth. Somebody else that's more suited for that. And that's exactly what Esther was going through. That'll be, somebody else can handle it. Well, like, we are that somebody else, because somebody else is being quiet and saying and thinking, oh, well, Matt's going to speak up. Well, Megan's going to speak up. And so this is really a time that we can take ownership and leadership and step into those quiet places where people are afraid to speak up. And yet, will there be repercussions? Possibly, depending on what we're talking about. But you're never going to regret speaking the truth. You're never going to regret sharing your voice and letting it be heard in a kind, respectful way. Yeah. But that is needed more than ever in today's world. And this is really an opportunity, I think, to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's so true, with respectfulness, with kindness, with love, you know. So the next one is to live up to your potential. And I think we've already kind of touched on this a lot. But, you know, I believe that God gives us natural abilities and talents and things that we're good at already, or we kind of already have an eye for. And we can, you know, to use another biblical example, we can take that talent and we can develop it, or we can just bury it in the ground, right? And so what kind of talents do you have that you're not developing? Are you finding ways to use them? Like, you know, if something that comes naturally to you is working with people, are you finding ways to volunteer and help that way, or maybe become a counselor? I don't know, but finding ways to develop those talents and step into those abilities even more is going to help you not have those regrets and really live up to your full potential. Another thing is just, if there's something that you, like a need that you see, okay? Even if you don't have necessarily the big talent for it, that's fine. Find a tribe of people, start asking friends, hey, do you know anybody that's good at? Mm-hmm. And then, you know what? The craziest things start to happen, I'm telling you. Because then they're like, you know what? I know somebody that would be perfect for that. Or I know my brother-in-law's best friend is great at technology, or whatever it is. And then you can help facilitate, almost be a matchmaker for that particular opportunity, and make it into something that it never would have been without your vision of seeing that need and filling that need. And truly, I believe that that's what people who are really movers and shakers do. They're not necessarily the entire brains behind the operation and they're doing everything. They're just somebody who had an idea and started recruiting people to help them out, you know?
Yeah, and I think what you kind of touched on there is we need to open ourselves up to explore and be curious, because a lot of us think, oh, I don't know what I'm talented at. I don't have any potential. And, you know, I felt that way. I still feel that way to some extent. But we have to, one, that can be used as an excuse to not do something. We like to tell ourselves that we're not talented, that we don't have any ability, so therefore I don't have to do anything. Right. But we have to open up our minds and be curious, and like you're talking about, explore. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it takes it takes time, it takes cultivating, it takes growing, it takes putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. Because while we all have, I think we would all say, we all have potential. We all have, at least we ascribe to that. We all have potential within us.
Absolutely.
You do have to grow that. It's not going to just, most people, it's not just going to come out and you're going to exhibit it and it's going to be easy peasy.
Right.
Like, you have to take the time to cultivate it and grow that potential. And I mean, like I was thinking, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but if you think about like a sports car or something that has, I mean, it can go 0 to 100 in 3 seconds, and it has all the bells and whistles, and it is the fastest, the best, the strongest. But if you just keep it in the garage and you don't ever, get it out on the road, then it's worthless. You might as well not have that. And so sometimes I think we like to, when I tell somebody, or when if you think of even a work situation, when the boss says, "Oh, Matt has some potential," that feels good for somebody to say that you have potential. Mm-hmm. But potential that isn't realized it's worthless.
Yeah, it's vain. So that's part of it, is developing those talents and abilities or ideas that you have. And it doesn't have to be like we talked about last week. Just have a brain dump of a bunch of different things that you want to pursue. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be all at once. You have to go after everything. Just have a brain dump time and then choose one thing that you're going to start acting on, and it's amazing how things will start to add up.
I mean, if you're curious, we like to also kind of get caught in this trap that if I start one thing, then I have to do that for forever and I can't switch lanes. Like,
that's not true.
No, I mean, you can try to explore. I mean, there's a lot of different options to like Megan was talking about. You probably know people in your community or adjacent to your community that are doing things that you'd like to do or like to learn about. And that if you can tap into that, then you can, explore different things to really find that fit for you. And it's not going to take a lot of commitment and not a ton of time, not a ton of investment money-wise, for you to kind of find that fit and explore and have fun. And maybe you like to do 2 or 3 things instead of focusing on one. I mean, there's unlimited opportunity. We just have to go find it and be curious.
Yeah, we have to be brave enough, and we have to prioritize it, because you're never going to have the time. It's never going to be like, oh, you know what, today I just have all the time in the world. And you know what? Just make it a priority. Put it in your calendar. Block out that time to have that exploration or to pursue some of those opportunities. And like Matt said, it's unlikely that it's going to cost you a lot of money. It's just going to cost a little bit of your time and attention. And it'll be worth it because you'll have explored an option to help you on your journey toward realizing that potential in a bigger way.
Yeah.
So our next point is about being more self-sufficient.
Yeah, I think this one has really kind of got me thinking about it over the past few months that we've experienced with COVID, is not as much as possible relying on other people, other influences to be able to run our lives and be self-sufficient. Because when you look at our modern world, a lot of us rely on a lot of people or corporations to really get our lives going. And if those things were removed, then we'd be in a lot of trouble. I mean, most of us don't grow any food. Most of us don't, build our homes. I mean, anything. We're very, very on the grid, if you will. And so my point isn't that we need to go off the grid, but finding ways to be more self-sufficient in really taking back ownership of our lives and not giving that ownership to whether it's the government, whether it's our corporations at work, really trying to bring some of that back to ourselves so that we can really pursue those some days and not blame other people when we're not able to accomplish those. So whether it's starting a side hustle so you don't have to rely as much on your 9-to-5 job if that were to disappear is a good example of that.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And it's Jim Rohn talks about this in one of his he's since passed, but he was a business philosopher and just seemed like a really neat person. But he would talk about this example of, well, I'm not successful because, and then, people inserting, like filling in the blank, like because the government, because of taxes, because of the, all these different things. And this was like in the, 70s and 80s that he was preaching this. And somebody else taught that to him. As long as we have an excuse, as long as we insert somebody that is the reason that we're not successful, you know what I'm saying? Like taking that ownership back and saying, no matter what obstacle I'm facing, I am going to make this happen. And it's amazing because you even look at monetarily, for example. There's this huge study that the Dave Ramsey Solutions people put together, basically Chris Hogan did, and it's of the study of all these different millionaires. It's like the largest study ever or something, and like a super small percentage of them actually like it was family money or somehow inherited it or whatever. Everybody else worked their little heinies off for it, you know, like they worked hard and they applied themselves and they didn't give up. And that's what we're saying, you know, finding ways of, you know, taking the responsibility back for your life, whether it's monetarily, whether it's with your mindset, having that responsibility come back to you. And, you know, I think when you say someday, it's like, oh, someday, if this happens, if this person gets it together, you know?
Yeah, or even, I mean, we kind of started off in our first episode thinking about this, that, I'll be able to pursue what I want when I retire. Well, that's putting a lot of stock in the government to have your retirement fund there for your Social Security. That's putting a lot of stock in your employer to be able to be contributing to your 401k or whatever it might be so you can retire. We put a lot of stock in other people to supply what we need, and we need to make sure as much as possible we bring that back into our realm of, like Megan said, of responsibility, so that we aren't putting off the things, our dreams, our goals to tomorrow. We're doing those today and making actions every day to reach those goals.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one is give back more and make an impact. And obviously, wherever you are right now, you can start giving back, you know, even just with your time and your bare hands, right? But, you know, when you don't pursue these things, then you may miss out on opportunities to give back more and make an impact. And we kind of already touched on this with, you know, somebody going without because you didn't step up. But I even think about, like, maybe you work a side hustle, not necessarily because you need the money, but because you know that an organization you really care about needs the money, or you just want to be able to have it, to be able to give anonymously, because whenever you hear of somebody with a need, or whatever it is, you know, sometimes these kind of things can be multi-purpose in your life, and they can be a way to give back more fully. Also with your time, your ideas, your talents, there are so many ways that we can be giving back. And if we hide and we're silent and we're just like, oh, someday I'm gonna give $100 to everybody I see, or whatever it is, well, that's a dream right now. That's not a reality, right? Or, you know, you may say, like, someday I'm gonna, you know, adopt a child in a third world country and do the thing where you contribute every month. Okay, well, some days right now, start today. Start putting some money aside. Put your change in a jar every time you come in. You know, start putting $1 a day or $1 a month aside. You know, find something that you can start, even no matter how tiny it is, right now, to bring that someday into the present and say, I'm going to take ownership of this and I'm going to start giving back and making an impact now, instead of putting it off for this later date, this magical time that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing we like to tell ourselves, that once we hit it big, or once we, you know, get those retirement funds, or once we get the inheritance from our family, that's when we're going to give back. Right. And there's a saying, something to the effect of, if you don't give $1 out of 10, you're never going to give, you know, $10,000 out of 100,000. Right. Or, you know, $10,000 out of $1 million. Like, if you're not going to give that small percentage, when you have $1 out of 10, if you're not going to give that 10% away, then you're never going to give a bigger 10% away. Right. But it's like a trick that we like to tell ourselves that, and I think a lot of times it's good natured, but we think, oh, well, I just can't afford that. I can't afford to give that away, but I'll be able to later. Well, that's just a trick that our minds play on us, because in reality, most people, if they're not going to give the $1, then they're not going to give the $10,000. Yeah. And like you said, that isn't just monetarily, but it's time. It's, if you're not giving back in some way to your community, to your family, then you're not going to do those things later. And I also think, like you were saying, or like we were talking about, that giving back is a form of service that we want to make sure we're incorporating into our lives right now and every day, because we're not guaranteed that time in the future. And at least for me, I would much rather have somebody spend 10, 20 minutes with me today than maybe a few hours 20 years from now when they
Right.
might have time. Especially if you think about a family relationship, a father-son, a mother-daughter. I'd much rather have those 10, 20 minutes with my father that day when I was a child, as opposed to a theoretical time when he was retired. Like, the present is all that we have, like we've continued
Right.
to talk about, and we need to try to emphasize that and make that a priority as opposed to looking towards the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's just so many ways that we can, going back to the tricking your brain. I mean, we played this same game, and it was really interesting because one time we went to this financial planner and many years ago, and the biggest thing we got out of that working with this guy was that he said, what if you budget these things? A lot of the time we're like, oh, we'll just wait until, but he's like, no, this needs to be a budget line. Like, you need to start budgeting for different things, and giving back is one of them. And we have a budget line for giving back. Monetarily, we try to set aside hours to do that. It doesn't make us better than anybody else. I'm just saying that's something that we've chosen to do because we see the importance of right now. Like Matt said, right now, today is all we have. And this month, whatever, we're not promised a later time. And so making the most of right now with what we have, with what God has given us, is so, so important.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because we've done that for a while now, but setting aside money each month above what we contribute back to our local church, because then when things come up, like, we don't have to spend it that month if the issue doesn't come up, but it can accumulate. And when an issue comes up that we know is something that we care about, or we know that is really in need and really speaks to us, then we have that set aside. We don't have to think, oh, well, we don't have money for that, or oh, we are going to have to give up something. We already have that planned out. And I mean, the selfish part of this is, if you want to look at it selfishly, is it feels good to give back. And it feels good to make an impact. So if you want a selfish reason for it, I mean, there's a lot of studies done that if you give back, it improves your mood. The givers always feel better than the people that are constantly takers. And so it's a really good thing to do, but it also feels good to do, especially when you get in the habit of doing it and really contributing to people or needs that mean something to you, and that you're really making a positive impact on those people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really made a big difference for us, especially like Matt said, when something has come up and it's been near and dear to our hearts. We know that we've already thought ahead to make sure that we have something set aside. So that's just our mindset shift. It can be as easy as that. It can be as easy as tomorrow you add a line item in your budget, or you go to Every Dollar and create a budget. We've been there too. And start just even $1 or whatever it is that you feel like you can contribute right now, and start there instead of someday. That's not an actual day on the calendar. So that's all we had. Do you have anything else you wanted to say?
I mean, if any of those resonated with you, maybe leave a comment on which one you think is a biggest struggle for you or a biggest motivator for you to change your mindset. And like we said at the beginning, this is a mindset. It's not just a slogan. It's something that we're actively thinking about and actively trying to incorporate in our lives. And it's something that comes with time. And like we said at the beginning, the reason we're starting this is because we're on that journey. We're on that path. So we're right there with you, but we want to show you and document exactly what this looks like for us.
Yes.
And so that when we look back 5-10 years, there's going to be a lot of progress. And so please start with us on this journey, because I know, at least for me, looking 5 years in the past, I haven't always made the progress I wanted to this day. And I don't want to look back when I'm 36 and look back to today and say, wow, those past 5 years, I really could have made some progress and I didn't take those actions.
Right.
So please come on this journey with us. We're looking forward to sharing more with you. And just thanks for watching tonight.
Yeah, have a great night, you guys.
Bye.